potential cooperation between Brazil and the United States on the production of biofuels. Turn off your blackberries. But it's actually, this is an idea that came from probably the foremost expert in Brazil on ethanol from the agricultural side of the equation, which is my dear friend Marcos Young. And we have developed over the last few weeks a proposed global study on supply and demand of biofuels in the next 2 decades. What are the implications of that in terms of food supply, in terms of what are the policy implications, what are the environmental implications. We have seen here many articles written about that. As a Brazilian that has read many articles in Brazil over the last 30 years about the subject, I can see that some of the information being distributed, printed in the United States is really off the mark. I wanted to remind you of a very important statement made in a deposition to Congress here in June by Eduardo Pereira de Carvalho. He is the leader of UNICA, the cooperative of producers of ethanol in Brazil, reminding people that the discussion that the producers of ethanol in Brazil was interested in was one of real about cooperation, that Brazil was not thinking about replacing American producers of ethanol, but rather into creating a world market for ethanol and to expand this market far and wide. It was really in that spirit that we sort of proposed this study, and we partnered with Iowa State University, that is the center for the studies of corn-based ethanol. So if you are willing and available, we invite you to come back here. Next Tuesday in the afternoon, starting at 2, we will have Marcos Young and Professor Bruce Babcock from Iowa State. We also have Professor Wallace Steiner, who is one major expert on this field from Purdue University in Indiana. And then we'll have to discuss 2 representatives of the official side. We'll have Gregory Manuel, the Special Assistant to Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice for this area, the whole area of international global energy, and also we'll have an expert from the Brazilian embassy, Emerson Claus, that has worked very much on this issue in the Brazilian side of the government. So we invite you to come here. During that presentation, we will launch the study, and we will continue. This will be followed by this event. That event will be a webcast, and we will start here an effort that could take as long as 2 years to complete. Having said that, I would like to give the floor to Minister Carlos Alfredo Lazari Teixeira, who is currently the Chargé d'Affaires of the Brazilian Embassy here in Washington. Alfredo.
Thank you, Paulo. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my pleasure to welcome you here at Wilson Center for the annual symposium of the ABCI Institute. In its 3rd year running, this event has become a welcome tradition in Washington's international trade calendar, and one that the Brazilian Embassy has been proud to support and will continue to support. For we believe that it is through a dynamic exchange of information, dialogue, and mutual understanding that both Brazil and the United States can explore common interests and move forward towards mutually beneficial trade objectives. Ethanol is one fertile ground to explore common goals. Let me share with you some very quick thoughts on the matter. Agribusiness is one of the greatest strengths of the Brazilian economy, particularly the production of ethanol. Brazil produces over 400 million tons of sugarcane a year, and almost half of it goes to the production of ethanol. In 10 years, Brazil may double its production of ethanol, using almost the same area for cultivation of sugarcane, currently at 3 million hectares. It is estimated that by the year 2012-2013 crop, Brazil should be exporting almost 2 billion gallons of ethanol due to investment that the sector is due to receive. Brazil has used ethanol as a fuel on a large scale for more than 30 years, first with cars that ran exclusively on alcohol, and now with flex fuel vehicles which run both on petroleum and alcohol, and on any mixture of the two. Brazil is also investing in biodiesel mills, producing diesel from vegetable products for use as an alternative to the oil product. Today, the legislation authorizes the addition of 2% biodiesel to the common diesel sold in the country, a percentage that should become compulsory in 2008. In 2010, the percentage will rise to 5%. The Brazilian government estimates that the production of biodiesel in the country should reach 900 million gallons in the next 4 years. Another great promise is the production of H-Bio by Petrobras. H-Bio is a diesel obtained through the mixing of vegetable oil with petroleum during refining, through a process called hydrogenation, which involves the addition of hydrogen. With this, it is possible to obtain a fuel very similar to common diesel, but with lower levels of sulfur and greater quality on burning, making it less polluting. The product also becomes cheaper as part of the petroleum is replaced with vegetable oil. Petrobras is considering to have the HBO process operating at least in 3 refineries by the end of 2007. Brazil and the United States are working together to create a global standard for ethanol. The goal of turning ethanol into a global commodity is of utmost importance. For ethanol to become a commodity, we need to have standards, guidelines, universal rules, and more countries that produce and consume. There will be no significant volume of international trade if ethanol is produced only by few countries. It is fundamental for other countries to start producing it too. During the World Economic Forum held in Davos on 26th of January, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva reaffirmed Brazil's willingness to help other interested nations to develop their biofuels industries, including through the transfer of technology to developing countries. President Lula also called on developed countries to finance biodiesel projects in developing countries as a means of reducing global inequality. Biodiesel projects have many attractive aspects to developing countries. These projects would address the issues of climate change and poverty eradication, as well as alleviate the pressure over sugar and alcohol markets. Turning developing countries into producers of a commodity for which there is a guaranteed demand would be a tremendous achievement. I'm sure that the speakers in this panel will bring you many interesting facts and ideas on the matter. Once again, I thank you all very much for coming here today. Thank you very much. And I would like now to have Aluísio on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos Alfredo. It's an honor for ABCI Institute to receive such an illustrious panel. This, for those of you who don't know, is the who's who on ethanol that's sitting right in front of you. I couldn't put together any more representatives from initiatives in Brazil and in the United States in the ethanol industry than what you're going to see tonight. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome everybody, and since everyone is waiting for the ethanol to speak, and while nobody is leaving the room, so instead of speaking at the end, I'm speaking right now. So to let everyone know that next year on the Friday of Carnival we'll be here again. In any case, one last reminder, the books that the ABCI Institute puts together, they're outside and they're available for a contribution, which is, it's shown on the table right outside. If you're interested, just, you must speak Portuguese, unfortunately. We're going to have English versions soon, but right now they're only in Portuguese. And thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Thomas.
Thank you very much, Aluísio. Thank you also for putting together this program and for the sponsors. My name is not Ubiratã Matos, as you may think. You know, Ubiratã Matos is sitting there. I'm Thomas Felsberg. We're interchangeable, right? My plane was late, so Ubiratã sat in for me, and I'm doing the same for him now. We have a wonderful panel here this afternoon. On my very left side, Brian Dean, Executive Director of the Inter-American Ethanol Commission, the state of Florida. Then to my right here, Paulo Strini Barbosa of the Sociedade Corretora de Álcool. To my left, Jim Boyd, Energy Commissioner and Vice Chair, California Energy Commission. To the far right, without any ideological concessions, Roberto Janetti da Fonseca, who is Director of Fiespa, of International Relations and Foreign Trade. And finally, to my far left, also without any ideological implications, John Doggett, Vice President of the Corn Growers Association. So we will start with Brian Dean.
Thank you very much, and I'd just like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to be here. It's wonderful to come down here from Miami to enjoy this brisk weather and to remind me of why I left Washington in the first place, among the many reasons. I've been told that the expeditious completion of this panel will result in copious quantities of another form of alcohol available to all of us, so I will, in that spirit, I will be as brief as I can. The Inter-American Ethanol Commission is an organization in its very fledgling state, so perhaps it's best to just begin by giving you a little bit of history. And the reason why my bio does not include a long litany or history of involvement in the issue of renewable fuels is because I have none. I went down to Florida at the request of then Governor Bush to promote free trade and to engage in diplomacy in the Western Hemisphere to support Miami and the state of Florida's bid to host the permanent secretariat of the FTAA, or the ALCA. So for purposes of transparency, that is the background, and I think you can probably all intimate why that job has evolved into something a little bit new by any review of the current status of the hemispheric trade agenda. We remain committed to the FTAA, or whatever manifestation it takes. But really, in all seriousness, the origins of this group come as a direct result of where we were in Florida as advocates for a hemispheric economic integration. Clearly, our forays throughout the region aggregated a significant amount of support for the economic integration regime in the FTAA. However, the Mercosur and, of course, Brazil had different notions, and there's really no contemplation of a hemispheric vision toward trade integration without Brazil. So we began to explore other areas of dialogue, not designed clearly to kind of surreptitiously navigate around the issue of something that was contaminated in the political jargon of Brazil and Mercosur, more broadly speaking, but with a legitimate view toward finding areas of convergence. Governor Bush, in April of last year, presented to Washington a broad-based policy recommendation on renewable fuels. Florida is a state, and I won't get into the factors behind this for sake of time, but Florida is a state that, following the periodic natural disasters that become our state, and other factors, geographical factors, is a state that's disproportionately affected by fluctuations in the price of oil, transportation issues that affect the storage of gasoline and refining of oil. And there's a clear and compelling need for the diversification of our transportation fuel mix nationally, perhaps globally, but in Florida it's even exacerbated, particularly in the aftermath of one of our hurricanes or other natural disasters that come our way from time to time. The governor, as a gentleman who immerses himself in public policy and knows all of the nuances, personally took the time to work on a policy recommendation that at the time seemed rather audacious, and that was the doubling the amount of ethanol in the U.S. transportation fuel mix contemplated in the 2005 energy bill to 15 billion from 7.5, and calling for that to be in place by the year 2015. Clearly, that required a deeper assessment of where that ethanol would come from and what would be needed to accommodate that dramatic expansion in the marketplace. Former Governor Bush, uses the term when he is charging his staff and his people to come up with ideas, to think about what he refers to as BHAGs, which are big, hairy, audacious goals. And this was one of his BHAGs, and it came our way at an organization called Florida FTAA, and we decided to explore its prospects and how this might feed into a hemispheric discussion on energy security and hemispheric energy cooperation. Governor Bush at that time was having some initial conversations with then Brazilian Agriculture Minister Roberto Rodrigues, who is, I'm sure, a very good friend of many of my co-panelists, and he's one of the elder statesmen of the Brazilian renewable fuels project, and a person who almost has a messianic fervor when he discusses the issue of renewable fuels and ethanol. One has the feeling that you're in a revival tent when you listen to Roberto Rodrigues discuss the new civilization behind ethanol. He was clearly an ideal person because in Brazil, Roberto is a gentleman who is well placed in the political establishment throughout, and is also an individual who comes from the industry, understands the industry, and is well connected with the industry. Currently, he wears a Fiesp hat, I know, and also with Fundação Getúlio Vargas. And he and then Governor Bush entered into a relationship that was very, very positive. And later into the fold came the Luis Alberto Moreno, another good friend of the governor, the ex-governor now. And the three of these gentlemen, with the support of those of us that were working on this ethanol notion, determined that this could bear fruit if we were to formalize this relationship, visit Brazil, and discuss where we might go on the issue. And one of the things that caught us by surprise when we went down to Brazil and we met Roberto and many other people from both the private and public sectors, and it'll come as no surprise to those who have been immersed in this issue for some time, was the fact that the Brazilians weren't asking us as emissaries of a U.S. organization that has some influence on the political outcomes and policy outcomes to discuss the capacity of the U.S. ethanol marketplace to bring in more ethanol from Brazil. There was no discussion of that or any of the mechanics behind the issues that make it difficult for that to happen. The issue was Brazil's desire to demonstrate really global and regional leadership on the issue of renewable fuels. In a variety of areas, in its desire in many sectors to participate and collaborate with the United States as the other major ethanol producer in creating this and realizing this dream of a global marketplace and a commodities market in ethanol where there was room at the table for everybody. And the Governor Bush, immediately when he was presented with the results of our assessment trip to Brazil and elsewhere in the region, and our list of policy implications and potential areas where the battle might be met in our own domestic political landscape, the governor said to me, he said, "Brian, when you're in public policy, rarely does something like this cross your desk. This is not just a win or a win-win. This is not some zero-sum game of public policy. There are a convergence of factors right now that make this a perfect storm for us to do something serious on this issue. Of course, I need not mention the implications of our dependence on foreign oil from unstable and often antagonistic quarters of the world, the opportunity to improve our environment, the emerging consensus across ideological currents that there's something happening out there, and that the greenhouse effect and global warming is something that needs to be addressed. The opportunity to promote an industry that is already strong in the United States but could become stronger and create more opportunities in our heartland and our agricultural sectors. An opportunity to promote economic development and poverty alleviation and economic growth based on market models. which is something we all believe in at the Commission, in Latin America. So what the governor's directive to me was let's just make this work. Let's create this commission and let's get to work in a number of areas. And we've now incorporated some other individuals into the mix that are very complementary to the three gentlemen I've mentioned, including Charles Brathwaite, who is the Director General of the Inter-American Association for Cooperation on Agriculture, which is a subsidiary organization of the OAS located in Costa Rica, and many, many others. And there are several others, not even from the region, who are entering into the fold in all likelihood, including the former Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Koizumi. So that's a little background on the origins of the commission. I'll have to say though that the BHAG, the Big Hairy Audacious Goal that was set by Governor Bush, has been more than doubled, given the President of the United States' recent State of the Union address. I had a chance encounter with the former governor of Iowa at the Biltmore Hotel in Miami, Coral Gables, just last week, who happened to be passing through, exploring opportunities for his fledgling presidential campaign. And I was shocked to learn from him that the former governor of Iowa, there's probably no former or current elected official in the country who has a better grasp of the ethanol economy and its political significance in his region of the country, that he is calling for 60 billion gallons of ethanol in the U.S. fuel mix. I don't recall at which point in time, and he is actually doing something that is not in our current vernacular, calling for the suspension of the import tariff on ethanol. And if that's not a controversial move for a former governor of Iowa, I was very surprised, as were others who were in the room when he let us know that this was the position he had taken. What we intend to do, and I think I had heard this from one of our presenters earlier, in terms of our objectives, we are young. We were launched on December 18th of last year. Several of you in this room were at the launch, and I thank you for that. Is essentially, initially we're doing a survey of the region, which is already underway, similar to that which is being contemplated by Iowa State University and our friends in Brazil, which is to do a 360-degree review of the production capacity issues in the region, the regulatory and statutory obstacles and facilitators to increased production of ethanol in the region, not solely or even in terms of preference for export markets currently, but indigenous production for local consumption. Thank you very much. We are also going to, based on those assessments and the work that we are going to do on a country-by-country basis, we intend to create advocacy programs and roadshows to bring to those particular countries, which will include presentations to public policy officials, policy makers, policy shapers. It will be an opportunity to bring investors in to help to witness those areas of infrastructure need and investment that we've identified in our analysis. We are also in discussions with our own State Department and others who are coordinating the official dialogue between our two countries on how we might be able to use the Commission as a vehicle to promote some of the R&D cooperation throughout the region, of course orientating investment toward high needs areas, working toward the establishment ultimately of a strong and viable commodities market in ethanol, and a number of different issues that integrate all of the various aspects of both the policy and the technological issues that may present challenges and opportunities for us, with the ultimate goal of creating a regional and ultimately global marketplace in ethanol production. So I hope that gives you some idea on our background, and I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on the panel. I think my 10 or 12 minutes has expired, so we'll pass the word, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have as to where we are going from here and where we fall into this whole puzzle that's coming together on the issue of renewable fuels in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian, for this excellent explanation of a wonderful initiative, you know. I would also like to say that we're very fortunate today to have as the commentator of this panel Mr. David Palmater, who is sitting there, and he will then will make his final comments after the panel has made his explanations. So, as you all know, David has been the champion of the Brazilian causes at the WTO. He's responsible, I guess, for most, if not all, of the good causes at the WTO and the victories which Brazil had there. Our next speaker is Ms. Paulo Barbosa from SCA Trading.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the ABCI Institute for the invitation. Thank you, Aluísio, for the opportunity. I left the Brazilian Carnival, a hot summer. I got a cold, and I'm here. It's a pleasure. I'm going to talk the Brazilian ethanol market and the new challenges. My purpose is to update you on the Brazilian market. I have divided my presentation into 4 parts. Something about SCA, production figures, the marketing, and to finish something about AITA, International Ethanol Trade Association. I'd like to start by talking a little about SCA. SCA is a brokerage and trading company founded in 2000 in Brazil, with head offices in São Paulo. It's an ethanol marketer, and it's representative of 50 sugar and ethanol plants in Brazil, located in São Paulo, Minas Gerais, and Goiás states. About 8% of the total ethanol produced is traded in the domestic market, and the balance for export. SCA volumes represents 25% of the total Brazilian. So much for SCA. Let's move on to some Brazilian production figures. At present, the Brazilian figure shows 318 plants in operation and 46 to be started up till 2008. Except for 2 or 3 years, the sugarcane production has been going up expressively, responding for an increase in the demand of the sugar and ethanol, especially in the past 6 years. From 1975 up to now, the sugarcane has risen by more than 6 times, and it's likely to grow up 10% per year. The pro-alcohol has proven to be the biggest program for substituting oil with biofuel in the world. In the beginning, it was an answer to the 2 oil shocks, and the government became worried about the oil dependence. At present, there is no government subsidies, and the production is totally based on private initiative. About 85% of the cane growing areas are in the center-south. The sugarcane is the most important culture in Brazil, in economic, technological, and social terms. The sector employs more than 1 million people and brings benefits and development to hundreds of cities in the countryside. The center-south is the most favorable place because of the conditions, land availability, climate, moisture. Additionally, it has well-developed agricultural technology and management skills. As a result, the sugarcane has tripled in the 30 years. An important increase in agricultural productivity has been reached, and new improvement can be obtained in coming years. The green graph represents the conventional production, and the red graph represents a new production method called hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is a technology that has been developed to produce ethanol from sugarcane and bagasse, or waste. The bagasse fiber is basically cellulosic fiber. The process breaks the cellulose, so it can be fermented easily to be converted into ethanol. This is all I have to say about the Brazilian production. Now we will move on to the market. We are proud to present the astonishing success of the Brazilian program. Since 2002, the consumption reached more than 20%, running in a free market competing with gasoline without subsidies. In Brazil, the flex fuel cars are a complete success. It represents a victory of joint efforts from government, car makers, and producers. Today, 17% of the total car fleet is already fueled by 100% ethanol, or E100. Except for Toyota, that's coming this year, all the automakers has 100% of the vehicles powered by ethanol and gasoline. In fact, in Brazil, we drink the best and drive the rest. About 20% of the ethanol is being exported. Since 2000, Brazil has been the most important supplier in the world because it's the only country that has met the conditions for a quick answer. We are going to double exports in the next 5 years. An export figure of 2 million gallons is easily attainable without prejudice to the domestic market. The US was the most important off-taker in 2006. The ethanol is going directly to the US or through CBI, Caribbean Basin Initiative. Then the total amount of ethanol entered into the US is represented by the two first block of columns in the graph. This export includes ethanol for fuel and for industrial purpose for other countries. This slide represents car sales in Brazil. At the present, 8% of the cars produced are flex fuel cars. Up to 2005, sales of gasoline-fueled cars were bigger than flex fuel cars. From 2005 and forward, flex cars have become the biggest part. Another issue concerning to the ethanol producers, cogeneration is an important source of extra revenue for producers. A plant that processes 1.4 million metric tons of sugarcane, a medium capacity in the Brazilian scenario, produces electricity to supply a city of 750,000 inhabitants. It brings a 13% increase to the plant revenues. This clean energy is produced from the surplus of bagasse. The ethanol market is just in its childhood. Technological and economic obstacles have been broken in the last years, and now the drive is more political and commercial. The US and Brazil have a role to be played as major producers, creating conditions to incentive and guarantee the production even in the whole Americas. The world is demanding a good economic, political, and environmental solution represented by biofuels. Ethanol can bring us this solution. It's the best and cheapest alternative. A call for a fruitful partnership and action for the new energy era. We have looked at the ethanol market. Let's look now at IETA. IETA, International Ethanol Trade Association, was founded in Brazil in 2006. Although this entity was founded in Brazil, it will be globalized because of its importance. The associates are players of the ethanol market, such as trading companies, producers, surveillance companies, distributors, major oil, etc. Its main objectives are the development of the ethanol market, discussing contract models, specifications, transport contracts, some arbitration issues, etc. In short, a lot of issues concerning the world of ethanol. Some of the most important companies have already joined IETA. That brings me to the end of my presentation. But before finishing, let me just summarize. First, I talked about SCA and what is the core business of the company. After that, we looked at the Brazilian figures and its extraordinary capacity to react facing oil crisis. Then, we saw how the Brazilian market is developing, how strong the presence of flex fuel cars is, and the importance of some agreement between Brazil and the US, which is strategic more than economic. Finally, we looked at IETA, its objectives, and its focus on improving the ethanol market. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulo, for this very, very thorough and very interesting presentation of the Brazilian ethanol. Our next speaker is Jim Boyd, Energy Commissioner and Vice Chair, California Energy Commission.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And let me see if I can figure out how to get my presentation up here. Well, that wasn't it. Is there somebody in the audience who...
If you come here to... Yeah, you just... Which one is yours?
That's me. Very good.
And then just... Yeah, that's...
Thank you. Every computer is different. My name is Jim Boyd. I'm an Energy Commissioner in California, and you wonder what I might be doing here, or what California will be doing here. And if I'm going to make it within my 12 minutes, you're going to have to deduct that from my presentation, or learn that from my presentation, rather than me giving a commercial about California. Big, hairy, audacious goals. That's a new term for me. That's California. It has been for a long time and remains to be. So,
I think we have it trademarked in Florida.
but we've never used it, so it's yours to have. And I've given a plug to my boss, the governor of California, who just reappointed me to the Energy Commission, so I thought I deserved at least to do that. Let me give you a context about California, which might give you a little bit of an explanation of why we're even here. This says fifth largest economy in the world. It might be sixth. We go back and forth between 5 and 6. We in France trade places all the time, and I don't know whether it's their ambitions or something goes wrong in California. But the nation-state of California is a big player economically, but we are just a state, sometimes regrettably, of the United States. We're an awfully big place, as you see from this data. I'm not going to read it all to you, but in the years I've been in government, our population is virtually doubled. The number of motor vehicles has gone out of sight. The amount of energy we consume is unbelievable, and the fact that we're the second largest consumer of diesel and gasoline in the world, only the rest of the United States consumes more, might start giving you a hint of why we might be a player in this arena. This is the heart of a problem, if not the problem. Then I just put this slide up here because in the year 2003, California once again kind of reached a turning point in dealing with its transportation fuel issues. California for years, during the 70s and 80s and 90s, experimented extensively with alcohol fuels, both ethanol and methanol, sometimes because of energy security caused by OPEC pulling the world's chain with regard to the price of oil, and California getting concerned about its voracious appetite for oil. But primarily in California, the driver for experimenting in alternative fuels has been air quality, believe it or not, because OPEC would, fix the price of oil and we go back on an exclusive and oil economy. In 2003, we had another one of those price volatility issues in California, and the people rose up and demanded their government investigate the oil companies and big oil. They must be fixing prices or colluding or doing something. And we and the Attorney General did investigate it, and we found out No, we can't find any of that. What it is demand and supply. Demand has outstripped the supply of finished transportation fuel products in California to the point the price is volatile. And the sole, more or less, transportation fuel is gasoline, diesel fuel, i.e. petroleum derived. Our legislature asked us to study other ways of getting more petroleum into California, and if all else fails, how can we reduce our dependence on petroleum? We produced a very provocative report, says we must start reducing our dependence on petroleum. By 2020, we should reduce it by 15%. That went nowhere politically. It's a very tough thing to deal with. But we kind of showed that the demand was going to go out of sight. Our ability to produce the single fuel was here. We need more alternative fuels. We need more technology. We need to reduce vehicle miles traveled, which had gone out of sight in California. So the results of that study were kind of kicked around our legislature for part of 2003. At the end of 2003, my agency produced a report called the Integrated Energy Policy Report, which we were asked to do every 2 years after our electricity sky fell on us. And we once again drove this point home that we have a transportation fuel problem. And the drivers for dealing with it not only are just energy security from the standpoint of price and volatility in California and the ever-present air quality concerns of California, but international security and international issues entered the picture. And jumping fast forward ahead, greenhouse gas entered the picture. Now, it frankly is the biggest driver of it all, but it is among the list of drivers that are forcing California to face up to the issues it has to deal with. Now, I made my first trip ever to Brazil just late last year to talk about what else? Ethanol. Both attending an international conference in Rio on the subject of alcohol fuels and visiting officials in the state of Sao Paulo, with whom the state of California has had a memorandum of understanding on global climate change since the year 2005. And we extended it to a discussion of ethanol. And I would join Florida in commending Brazil for years in coming to visit us in California, not to have us hammer down the tariff issue, but just to say we really think we need a world market and we'd like to see a world market and so on and so forth. Well, I think California might be able to help with that as a result of some of the things it has done. This is just another reiteration of the fact that we're painfully dependent on petroleum fuels. This just plots out gas price volatility in the United States for a couple of years, showing that California follows the national trend, but the price of gasoline in California is always a little higher because the demand is higher. Yeah, we require the cleanest burning gasoline and diesel fuel in the world, but that's not really why it costs more. That's mere sense. Just the demand has outstripped the ability of the world to provide us fuel. California has done a lot with regard to addressing its environmental problems, its public health issues driven by environmental problems, and has been a consumer of ethanol for quite a number of years now, because our cleaner burning gasoline, which dates back to the 1990s, requires an oxygenate. We used MTBE. You've probably heard of the infamous crash and the decision to withdraw MTBE, methyl tertiary butyl ether, which is an oxygenate, from the gasoline in California, leaving nothing more than ethanol to substitute for it. Now, we were using ethanol and have been using an oxygenate as a clean burning fuel and as an octane enhancer since we did away with lead a long time ago. So we were already pretty good consumers of ethanol in California, long before the last couple of years really began to put a lot of focus on the subject. And we have basically imported our ethanol from the Midwest. We produce a tiny bit in California. We want to do more. And we receive a little bit through CBI, I believe, most likely from Brazil. We have become the nation's largest consumer of ethanol as a result of this transition totally out of MTBE. Last year we used just about 1 billion gallons of ethanol just in the state of California. So we have become a major player in that arena. And in the last couple of years, we have striven mightily to try to address this issue of needing to have introduce alternative fuels, needing to meet our economy's needs for fuel, being a state like all other states where the population was born thinking it was a God-given right to have lots of cheap gasoline to power them around. So while you may think, those of you from other countries think gasoline is really cheap, in the U.S. it's a lot more than people thought it should be, and and our economy sits on some kind of an energy stool. So California has, for the last several years, under both governors, but frankly primarily this governor, launched multiple initiatives to address its air quality issues and to address its energy issues. I happen to chair for several years now the governor's biofuels working group, where we have been working for some time to introduce biofuels into California. We have set some big, hairy, audacious goals for ourselves on the use of biofuels. We have incredible amounts of waste cellulose in our state that could meet our needs completely if only the science and technology of cellulose would catch up with our needs. Well, just a few weeks ago, after doing other record-setting things with regard to California's own climate change program, aggressive climate change programs, and reducing CO2 emissions from the tailpipe of motor vehicles, our governor announced a low carbon fuel standard for fuels as one way we would get at the issue of how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in California, how to get to the transportation sector in addition to just controlling emissions from motor vehicles, and how to get the market to do this instead of additional mandates. This, I think, is the bridge that may help Brazil with regard to exporting perhaps more fuel into the United States. I'm here to appeal to other states, other nations, to seriously consider this kind of an approach to your own fuel supplies, this kind of an approach to your own desires to address climate change and the transportation sector's contribution to that. This could level the playing field pretty substantially. It requires fuel providers to decrease the carbon intensity. It's a standard that's going to be measured on a life cycle basis. We've been studying for about 2 years full fuel cycle analyses in order to meet our alternative fuel goals already. So this is directly related to the issue of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and this will be fed into the program we have now to have a low carbon fuel standard. This is just a chart, obviously borrowed from the NRDC, where they did an analysis that kind of showed directionally the carbon footprint of various fuels. It's directionally correct, but I don't think it's scientifically 100% correct. We will have data in the next 6 months that is the latest on this subject, although I think there'll be years of iterations on this subject. This approach provides quite a bit of flexibility. They'll have different options. We're going to see credit and trading markets created in this arena alone. So it really does take advantage of a market approach to this subject. In California, we have E5.7. For air quality reasons, we've not wanted to go beyond that mixture. NOx, ozone, what have you, but our scientists are telling us in studies of the last year we probably can go to E10 in California. If E5.7 means 1 billion gallons, you can extrapolate up what E10 likely will mean, and I expect to see E10 any day now. And there's just a host of other fuels that we are looking at, continue to look at. It has other benefits that you can see here on the screen. We think that will certainly help California, could help others if they approach this, and as you know, the EU announced the equivalent of the California program about 3 weeks after we announced it. We had lots of reasons for doing it. We've been studying cap and trade for quite some time. We decided in the fuels area this was a better approach. Provides flexibility and a lot of other benefits. As I've already said, we have lots of other transportation initiatives underway in the state. and we have to do all of them to meet our greenhouse gas targets, our alternative fuels targets, and to just continue to try to keep California's air relatively clean. Here's just an example of the reductions we think we'll see from various approaches in terms of CO2 emissions from motor vehicles. And as you see, the low carbon fuel standard, which we just announced, far outstrips other approaches we've been considering. So in conclusion, as we have concluded in California, a comprehensive approach, a combination of market and performance-based standards. Transportation is the California biggest contributor, and we think this approach will give us and perhaps others the approach they need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, Jim Boyd. We will now hear Roberto Janetti da Fonseca from Fiesp, São Paulo.
Just a minute.
Thank you.
So we coordinated well.
Okay, here we go. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation. Very pleased to be here with these distinguished speakers. And let me approach the theme of U.S. and Brazil, reasons for cooperation. I'm going to explain about why ethanol is the so highlights product that we are speaking now about it, and the sector overview in Brazil and USA, and some reasons for cooperation between the two countries. Well, the reason for ethanol to be such an important product today is because we have ethanol as a renewable fuel, a proven technology. In Brazil, we have 30 years experience with ethanol, with outstanding results, and we create a sustainable alternative for energy diversification. US and Brazil together, they produce 70% of the world's ethanol production. And both countries are happily expanding their markets and creating an international market. Biofuels demands to grow international, worldwide, and ethanol is the only proven alternative so far. Brazil and USA differ on feedstock on ethanol. We have created such expressions as etacorn from the United States and etacane from Brazil. Although they have the same specification, they differ in the source of feedstock they use to produce. Cooperation between Brazil and US is key for development of biofuels, because the two countries are such important players in the ethanol business. To transform ethanol in commodity, to reduce import barriers worldwide, and to develop rural economy in producing countries. Very fast, I'm not going to explain each point, but ethanol is cheaper, cleaner, and renewable. And also in terms of social benefits, ethanol is for sure a very good answer to developing countries, which need job creation and rural support. So in terms of environment, social policy, and economic logics, ethanol is the answer that we are looking for. The brief experience of Brazil of 30 years in ethanol, we have been growing very much since the beginning to today. We produce about 17 billion liters of ethanol, and the introduction of flex fuel has created a new landmark for the ethanol business in Brazil, as my colleague Paulo has just mentioned. Today, almost 80 to 90% of new car sales are flex fuel. And domestic consumption takes as much as 85% of our ethanol production. So we need to, first of all, to eliminate a myth that ethanol producers in Brazil are planning to invade the US market. We do not have such a quantity, such a volume of ethanol to export. But what we need to do between US and Brazil, and I would like to mention at this point, is to get excess supply and deficit gap of demand to help each other to become much more safer and to eliminate the risk of demoralizing the ethanol project because of lack of supply in some of the international markets, including ours. Production area of ethanol in Brazil is about 6.5 million hectares, which is not that much. Of course, we can grow a lot, we can expand a lot ethanol production in Brazil, but it will take time and a lot of investment. Today, we have over 300 plants in operation, and as my friend Paulo told us, we have about 40 to 50 plants to come in operation in the next 2-3 years, and maybe about 90 plants in the next 5 years, which are still being planned and in the phase of feasibility study. And very important is the increase in productivity. About 10 years ago, we used to crop about 50 tons of sugarcane per hectare. Today, we are close to 100 tons per hectare, due to very good research institute we have at Piracicaba called CTC, and other research institutes like Embrapa, which are helping each other to improve the genetics of the sugarcane plant, so we are getting these good results in terms of productivity. Our logistic network is also being improved very much. We have major production areas in São Paulo state and neighboring states, and we have distribution terminals in many states of Brazil. We use terminal ports, especially in Santos, but also in Paranaguá, in Rio, Vitória, and Northeast ports. So we are also improving our logistics, and pipelines are now being planned to cross the interior of São Paulo up to the state of Goiás to transport ethanol cheaply from the interior of Brazil to the coast. Our exports are growing, but as I just mentioned, very limited to about 10 to 15% of our production. Last year, we export a little bit over 3 billion liters of ethanol over a production of close to 17 billion liters. As I mentioned, 80% of the vehicles sold are flex fuel, so domestic market is also growing very fast, and last year was about 14 billion liters market. And we have 29,000 gas stations around the country operating with ethanol. And 100% of gasoline in Brazil is either E25 or E20, depending on the availability of the product and the decision of government. Something very interesting to pay attention is the distribution between sugar and ethanol at the producing units. Of course, the relative price between sugar and ethanol may differ sometimes, and although ethanol market is growing much faster than sugar, which has a organic growth, we produce today about 50-50 share of ethanol and sugar in our sugar mills. And sugarcane has this alternative, which gives Brazilian producers the possibility or the flexibility to choose in the beginning of the crop how much they are going to produce of each other. Well, United States, very briefly, there is a long legislation from 1977 to 2005 helping to the environment, considering the environment as the main concern, and producing legislation to introduce renewable fuel in this country. The production, it's very much concentrated in the Corn Belt, with 96 plants in operation, 33 under construction and other major expansions. Total production of 4.4 billion gallons, a 20% increase in 2005. And what is surprising, astonishing, is that 30% of the US corn output is dedicated to ethanol in 2006. And this has made the corn price jump in 12 months from around $2 a bushel for $4.20 a bushel in January 2007. And this has become a matter of concern because corn prices are affecting other segments of the economy and the consumers, like the Mexican population, which is asking why tortillas are so expensive today because of ethanol in the United States, or the consumers in China that are very much concerned if the United States will have enough corn to export to China in the next coming years, as the United States produce 65% of the corn international market today. So these are very good questions. Maybe our colleague from Corn Growers Association will answer for us. I don't have the answer. It's up to you to tell us what to do. But ethanol blend is already in use in 35 US states, and however in 17 states, 18 is in use. And 600 gas stations exist across the country offering E85. But there are problems in the United States we have been told about distribution, especially on storage and transportation. States like Florida and California, I believe, sometimes they have shortage of ethanol, and this is something that U.S. authorities and ethanol companies, they have to consider that the supply-demand gap in some point has to be considered even to importation. Otherwise, this is going to demoralize the ethanol system in the country. Very briefly, how we could cooperate. U.S. today is producing a little bit more than Brazil, but Brazil and U.S. together, they produce about 70% of the world production. And Brazil is exporting to United States today last year, exported about 400 million gallons of ethanol, which represents about 80% of the U.S. consumption. But the tariff of 54 cents per gallon makes today, at today's price, is no longer feasible or possible to import. So makes the gap to increase if the importation does not match this supply-demand gap. This is a comparison between corn and sugarcane. The demand in U.S. is much larger than Brazil today. It's 5 billion gallons against 3.7. Our production is almost about the same, a little bit more to United States. But the productivity of gallons per acre in sugarcane is double than the same production from corn. And the cost of sugarcane is about 30 to 40% lower than from corn. Production plants and harvest area, we have in Brazil a forecast that we are going to grow our production of sugarcane to 684 million tons of sugarcane, which will make a production of ethanol to grow from 4.2 to 8.2 billion gallons, and exports are going to double in the next 6 years. But it is still very low volume to support the incremental demand worldwide. Investments considered $10 billion. In U.S., the demand is predicted by the President's speech of State of the Union to grow 7 times from now to 2017. And this will require a huge increase of corn to supply this volume, or new technologies like cellulosic ethanol to come. But the area, the acreage, which represents is about the entire state of Montana. And most of that because the oil demand is still steadily growing, and transport is the major reason for this growth. Ethanol trade worldwide is today about 5 billion liters, and 50% coming from Brazil. And let me show the world full ethanol production will reach 60 billion liters in 2010, which in my opinion is not enough to the worldwide consumption, including all these countries which are here. I'm not going to read one by one, but many countries in Latin America, Africa, Europe, Asia are already applying ethanol in their fuel consumption. And we have a big opportunity, Brazil and United States, to promote and make these countries to take the right step in the ethanol business. So our cooperation, it's, I believe, a very, very important point. Joking, Brian, with the FTAA, which we call ALCA, we say in Brazil that if we don't have ALCA, we go with alcohol. So it's today, I guess, the best issue to cooperate between US and Brazil is on alcohol. And technology transfer, infrastructure, and to find third countries to develop ethanol is something we can do very well together. And let me be very frank with you. I don't believe that we could demand or request the United States to eliminate the tariff now, because you need to keep moving your local ethanol industry ahead. We do not have enough to supply to the United States. But what you need is to consider the possibility to introduce new duty-free import quotas to supply your deficit. Otherwise, you are going to frustrate many consumers and states which are feeling today's shortage of ethanol. And maybe Brazil will need to import sooner or later as well. And by the way, our government has reduced our import tariff in Brazil for 0 to keep ethanol producers in line with the world market. We also need to create the harmonization of specification, ethanol futures markets, and also to promote agricultural development, to improve the technology and productivity, to reduce production costs. Ethanol as a commodity will be a key point for development of the renewable fuels and need international effort. We have to mitigate price volatility and promote the rural development in third countries, especially in Latin America and Africa. And I forgot to say that in Africa, we also have been testing and using cassava as a raw material for ethanol with very reasonable costs, lower than corn, a little bit higher than sugarcane. So it's alternative for poor countries to produce ethanol from cassava and maybe even to export ethanol to other parts of the world, especially developed countries. So there is a lot to cooperate, and I believe we are ready to establish a wood market for ethanol, and we need, of course, the partnership of all members of the ethanol community in the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. I think the idea of alcohol cooperation is a very good idea. I'll drink to that. And now we'll have Mr. John Doggett, Vice President, Corn Growers Association.
Well, thank you very much, and I will make every effort to make sure that you can drink to that fairly soon. Let me just begin describing our organization. The National Corn Growers Association represents the 300,000 corn growers across the United States. Corn is grown in 48 of the 50 states. We have affiliates, organizations in 20 states. We are the only organization, commodity organization at this time in the United States where the membership is increasing. Before I begin with a couple other remarks, let me just make a couple comments on Roberto's presentation. The 30% of the U.S. corn crop in 06 going to ethanol production is incorrect. It's 17.2. Interestingly enough, until about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was getting calls from folks wondering why our U.S. corn prices were suppressing the corn price in Mexico and thus impoverishing the farmers in Mexico. And now we've done completely the opposite in a very short period of time, which is kind of amazing. We do not export yellow or white corn to Mexico, and white corn is what Mexican people make tortillas out of. It's not yellow corn that our producers grow. So, but it is, I think, some other internal issues in Mexico that have caused the price of tortillas to be so high. The ethanol issue to the corn community has been intertwined since the 1980s. After the initial number of ethanol plants in the United States were built and then promptly went broke in the 70s, we gave it a second shot in the 1980s, less with concern as to providing fuel, but we had piles and piles and piles of corn all across the country, and the farm crisis was in its utmost, and there were a lot of people in the corn industry that said we have to find another market. We are too dependent on exports. We're too dependent on livestock. We have to find a diversified way of moving and using more of our corn. You know, when Archer Daniel Midland and Cargill would take up a bunch of corn and convert it into ethanol, folks got pretty excited when that increased the price of corn by a nickel or a dime in a 100-mile radius. But as we had more and more plants being built and being built by farmers, co-ops or LLPs, it became a near religion in parts of the Corn Belt, and folks still pray there every single day. Our board in December of 2004 sat down and said, where are we going to be in 10 years with our industry by 2015? And after a long day of deciding where our markets were going to be and where our production would come from, they came up with, we believe very seriously, that we could produce 15 billion bushels of corn, that would translate into 15 billion gallons of corn ethanol, and we would do that by the year 2015, so 15 by 15 by 15. And we only had to tweak the math just a little bit. The board convened again in June of 06 and reviewed that document. And every single member of our 15-member board said we were much too conservative. We were too conservative on how much corn we could produce. The 05 crop was the second largest crop we'd ever produced, and we did so in a year that was not optimal growing conditions across much of the Corn Belt. We had a lot of heat, we had drought. So the growers looked at the new seed technology and what that was producing on their farms and said, well, we can do better than 15 billion bushel by 2015. They also looked at developments in the ethanol industry and the fractionation technology that will soon be commercialized in the plants in our country, extracting the oil and extracting the fiber, and being able to get a much greater amount of ethanol per bushel of corn, and also that the fact that then the DDGs will be able to go in greater ratios to the monogastric livestock industry instead of just beef. We could go ahead and fill a need for the poultry and the pork industry. So it was I think as we get ready to convene international convention later this month, I think that one more time our membership will look at that and say 15 by 15 by 15 is very doable, and perhaps, again, way too conservative. You know, we just take a look at what our industry's done with private and public resources in ethanol research over the last 25 years. It's been amazing where our industry has come. It's interesting where we are going in relationship to our understanding of the corn plant. We are very close to having the corn genome completely mapped. We'll then begin the process of sequencing that mapping process and seeing what really lays within that gene and what we can do to get more production, get better production, and find some niches and some types of corn that will solve some problems. We've only been using biotech corn for 10 years in this country, and the first few years not much was used. This last year 62% of our corn crop was biotech corn. A small percentage of that was triple stack, having 3 traits instead of just the usual 1. That corn consistently outperformed conventionally bred hybrids by, in some places in the Corn Belt, by 20, even 30 bushel per acre. We are anticipating that the increase in yields will be exponential over the course of the next 5 years, with a trend line that could be extremely steep. The challenge we have is that ethanol's been maybe a little too good, and some of our livestock customers are a little nervous about the high price of corn. And as we remind them, the solution to $4 corn is $4 corn. And a producer who's been out there buying less expensive seed and maybe not following the best of agronomy practices, who might not be putting his corn on his best acres, and who may, instead of planting 33,000 seeds per acre, is only planting 28, and is not using precision application of fertilizer and chemical. That's what he did when he had $2 corn. When he has $4 corn, as one grower told me, my wife told me, I'm not going to be able to go fishing this year. The solution to $4 corn is $4 corn, and we anticipate that, while we don't want to go back to $2 corn, I think that would be I'm more concerned about $2 corn next fall than I am about $4 corn, because we will need to continue to produce more and more corn for the ethanol industry, for our livestock consumers that have been the biggest part of our market, and to continue to produce for export purposes. Our biggest concern right now with the ethanol industry is that we ramp up to provide more and more corn for the ethanol industry with this new technology, that we are about to hit what we call the blend wall. We consume about 140 billion gallons of gasoline in this country. The maximum rate for non-flex fuel vehicles, which is probably 96 or 95% of the fleet out there, you can go to 10%, and in Southern California you can go to 5.7%. So at some point we are going to hit a production number of around 12 billion gallons of ethanol, and we won't have any other place to put it. E85 has some promise, but there's only 600 pumps out there, and most folks don't know where they are, and there's not enough vehicles out there. And so right now we're only using 50 million gallons of ethanol for E85 out of 5 billion gallons of ethanol produced, 1%. Our concern is that in the next 3 years we're going to hit the blend wall. And what are we going to do then? Which is why we are very, very pleased to see the discussions continue, and I think we've seen some hope here that the United States government, the Brazilian government, can work to create a global market for ethanol, because we are going to have to be a global supplier and maybe even a global user of ethanol. But it certainly has been the hope for our folks from back in the 1980s when farmers were going out of business to today when, with new technology, there's hope back in rural America. And I think to sum it up, the best description of the hope that ethanol has brought to rural America is a dialogue I had with one of our board members, a guy by the name of Dave Nelson, who is a farmer in Iowa. He's the president of the local ethanol plant. And he said, ethanol's done a great thing for us here in this small community of 3,500 people. And he said, I'm glad we've raised the price of corn here locally. It's great for all the farmers. It's great that we have 1,500 people in this county have invested in this ethanol plant, and they're getting big dividends, and they're spending the money in this community, and it's brought 35 good-paying jobs that have health insurance and a retirement. And he said, that's a great, great thing. And he said, but I'll tell you what, the thing that makes me feel best about what we're doing here with producing ethanol is that I have a place to bring my kids back to. He said, including my daughter, who is finishing up her degree with the Montgomery GI Bill. She was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. She served in Afghanistan, in Iraq. And that's, I think, the thing that when our folks look at what ethanol is doing, is that it truly has brought a lot of hope back to rural America. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John Doggett. And I would like now to invite our commentator to assume the podium. David Palmater.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. I'm in the unenviable position of being the last person on the agenda on a Friday afternoon when I'm all that stands between all of you and the bar. And so I will be very brief because in addition to that unenviable position, I know absolutely nothing about ethanol other than what I read in the papers and what I see on the gasoline pump. But as a citizen here, consumer, taxpayer, so forth, the question I have, and maybe it's mainly for John, but for all of them, is I don't understand what sense it makes from a U.S. public policy point of view to have a 54-cent a gallon tax on ethanol imports, duty, tariff, and a 52-cent a barrel tariff on gasoline. Seems to me that if we went to 52 cents a barrel for ethanol, just equalize them, we may get more from Brazil, or we may not, but there are a lot of Caribbean countries out there and Central American countries out there that grow sugar and other crops that can produce ethanol. It would be in our interest for a wide variety of reasons, from energy security to social policy, to see that prosperity spread, and from a security point of view, to diversify our foreign sources of the energy we're going to need, and we do need, from the ones we have now. So I would just wonder, why do we have this policy, and why don't we change it?
I'm so surprised that question was asked. And I just happened to have a few little notes, though I could do it pretty much from memory. We have a 51-cent blender's credit in this country. That does not go to the ethanol industry. It goes to whoever breaks bulk, whoever puts the ethanol into oil. That's generally a refiner or a jobber, somebody who in the oil business that takes it to the pump. I think there's a great deal of resistance for us to go ahead and provide that blender's credit to ethanol. We do provide that to ethanol, regardless of its origins. But I think that the American taxpayer would be somewhat resistant to go ahead and offer that credit to foreign oil or to foreign ethanol. And I will agree with you on the part about the tariff on oil. It's ridiculous that it's that low. Secondly is the energy independence. I think we want to be, we're striving to be energy independent in this country, and why would we want to replace supplies of foreign ethanol or foreign oil with foreign ethanol? I think it's a grave concern that we have is we need to continue to spur our own production and our own use. The Caribbean Basin Initiative under President Reagan allows for 7% of the U.S. production to come to this country without the tariff. It has only been met one time in all the years that it's been in place. And again, we talked about the blend wall. What are you going to do with the ethanol that comes to this country when we hit that 12 billion gallons? And lastly, I just would say that the president has taken that subject off the table. The Democratic leadership in both chambers of the Congress have, and certainly Senator Baucus and Senator Grassley have, and being where they are in the Finance Committee, that's not going to happen. And you know, as we saw here in a couple of these slides, Iowa produces more ethanol than any other state, and we're about to enter into that fancy dance that all political candidates have to do in going through the state of Iowa. And we have asked, or will by next Friday, we will have asked in a public setting every single candidate currently running for the United States presidency, though maybe half a dozen more have announced since we started this afternoon. But we have asked that question, and will ask that question over and over again, and the question is framed thusly. Do you believe the American taxpayers should subsidize Brazilian ethanol by allowing it to come in duty-free and then getting the blender's credit? And I can tell you that we haven't had an answer that would be contrary to what I think we would want to see. We're going to be in a position where we don't need to import ethanol into this country. We're going to need to find a way to use E85 and all those things. And this is really, at this point, is a rather academic question that really is not something we're going to worry about, I hope.
I want to make, since you mentioned E85, I do want to make an observation there, since you've handled all the tariff questions. In this country, in the last 20, 25 years, we've produced over 6 million flexible fuel vehicles, and you mentioned how small the fueling infrastructure is. There's about 300,000 flexible fuel cars in California, and I found out recently 2 public pumps. There was one until just a few weeks ago, I guess, down in San Diego. So the basic problem is, other than in the Midwest where there's some impetus to push, there's just no fueling infrastructure. And why not? Why? Who controls the fueling infrastructure? And why would they want to sell something that they make 15% of in this country? So the auto companies have been getting CAFE credits, i.e. fuel vehicle efficiency credits, for making these cars ever since the CAFE program stopped 25 years ago at its current level. So as an energy commissioner, efficiency in California is job one. We have world record-setting efficiency for electricity and natural gas. We can't do anything about the efficiency of motor vehicles, and the nation has refused to do anything about the efficiency of motor vehicles. So we've been striving for a mixed portfolio of a diversified portfolio of fuels, since we learned in 2003 we're overly dependent on a single source. Of course, every president from and including President Nixon has said we need to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and you've seen what the statistic is. It's doubled in that period of time. So we have a political policy dilemma that we've got to deal with, and then yours is but one of the questions, but they're all connected. It's all part of a system that people are going to have to address.
Thank you. I would like Roberto to comment.
Yes, just a few comments and maybe questions to John of the National Corn Growers. First, about the price of $4.20 per bushel. I read in many newspapers, and I also listen from experts that at today's price, ethanol producers are running a little bit of profits, so they are not so profitable as before, especially that oil prices also have been reduced. Although they receive the benefit of the 51 cents credit backing forward the calculation of price. So it's really a critical situation today, in my opinion, at these prices of corn, how you are going to induce ethanol producers to invest and to expand with low profitability at $4 per bushel. And second point, you say about self-sufficiency of ethanol in the United States, I don't believe this is it possible, even now and in the future, because of the rise of your demand. If President Bush expectation is right, 35 billion gallons per year, I doubt very much that in any concern, in any alternative, the United States will be able to produce such a huge amount of ethanol unless the new technology of cellulosic it's feasible, and the turnaround of this industry would produce much more ethanol in terms of volume and lower price. At the corn situation today is completely unfeasible to the United States to be self-sufficient, in my opinion. And I can tell you that I came from Florida a few weeks ago, and I interviewed there a number of gas stations and blenders, and they told me that they don't have ethanol there since August. There is not a drop of ethanol there. Is it correct, Brian? You live there?
There's very little ethanol coming into the state right now.
Very little ethanol in Florida. There is a potential demand which is not supplied, is not fulfilled. So why not to get some imports, like from Caribbean quota, not to... I'm not against the tariff, let me say, because you need the tariff to survive. This is clear, reality. I'm not a naive man. But not to make the market to match and to give the consumer the product that is demanded is not in favor of the ethanol business. You have to think on that. Thank you.
A quick comment. I think what's going to change the equation is global climate change and the carbon footprint of fuels, which is just barely beginning to be examined, and I think that may level the playing field a little bit with regard to all the competitors for fuels, and it may raise questions about corn to ethanol versus sugarcane to ethanol versus cellulose to ethanol, which might allow room for more players, but it's a political question that has to be dealt with first, and the farm community.
John.
Well, I guess I would say that not all corn is trading at $4. That's the price if you buy or sell a bushel of corn today. Almost all of the ethanol industry has locked in their corn price. I have heard a number of the companies have locked their prices in for the next 3 years on their natural gas, their corn, and their ethanol. They've gone out there and hedged the market and made sure that they've got the means to do so. But not a lot of corn is trading at $4 today. A lot of corn traded at $2 6 months ago. So you know, it's the price, it's the average price, not the spot price, that makes for profitability. You know, we have 3 billion gallons under construction. We're currently producing 5 billion gallons, so we have another 3 billion gallons coming online this year. We are going to be able to meet the market. I'm unaware that Florida was short ethanol. I'm sure that the marketplace will take care of that. I guess I would disagree with the notion that corn ethanol is going to resolve all of the energy issues in this country. We've never set out to do that. I don't think it was ever been our intention, because we don't have the ability to do so. But we are not in the stand of believing that the perfect should stand in the way of the good. We've built an industry that will have a variety of feedstocks over the next 10, 12, 15 years.
Thank you. I think Paulo Sotero and Aluísio have some comments. I think yes. Aluísio is first. Right?
Thank you, Thomas. I don't want to let escape this opportunity here. I just saw something today that I would never expect. I had John Dockett, Jim Boyd, and Brian Dean agree on something very significant here, which is we just heard that ethanol is good for corn, is good for the price of corn. We heard what California is trying to do. We heard what the Ethanol Commission and the Inter-American Commission wants to do in Florida. Creating a global market for ethanol. The moment you do that, I think that the problems that the micro problems that we are raising here, which are a fact and they exist, I think that for the most part, if you have a global market for ethanol, most of it will be taken care of, I believe. The moment you have full production going on, not only in the United States and Brazil, but in Africa, in Europe, in the Orient, elsewhere, the moment you have demand picking up and people beginning to think of ethanol as a reliable fuel, I think all these problems will take care of themselves in the most part. Some imbalances may continue to exist here and there, but I'm sure it will take care of a distribution problem that the U.S. faces today is the biggest problem, I believe, and is how to market the ethanol, get the ethanol to the consumer. But I didn't want to let this very significant fact that I heard here today, pass by without mentioning it. And I was just commenting here with Minister Carlos Alfredo that if we can have every interested industry in the United States interested in making ethanol a global commodity and pushing towards a cooperation between Brazil and the United States to make ethanol a global commodity around the world, we can't miss, right? Okay. If you could comment on that, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have Paulo Sotero, and then we'll comment on this opportunity.
Thank you, Thomas. I just wanted to mention something. Is the old journalist in me talking now? Is this? We know that despite all the enthusiasm about ethanol here and in Brazil, and we have now this unprecedented diplomatic move of the President of the United States visiting Brazil and our President visiting here in the space of 3 weeks. And this is the theme that is moving this. We know that in Brazil there are resistances, and they are not ideological. They are people concerned with the questions of supply, of price in Brazil. And as Roberto mentioned, if there may be a situation in which we may get our act together in Brazil in economic terms. There is always the risk that we'll do something right and grow 5% or more a year. In which scenario we are not going to have any ethanol to sell to you, and as Roberto suggests, we are probably going to have to buy some. I wanted you to, in the context of your remarks, John, on this capacity of the United States to be self-sufficient on this. That's what I understood. Take for a minute Brazil ethanol out of the picture. There's no Brazil ethanol for you to use. How does the equation look to you in terms of the tariffs, which I agree is not the issue right now, but in terms of keeping the U.S. objectives in getting a ample supply of a supplement fuel, that's what ethanol can be in the United States.
Thank you. I would like the panel to respond. I think, John, you have been challenged, but please, any one of the panelists who has something to add, please go ahead.
Okay, we've been, in the last 5 years, those years that we increased our production by 25% were the years that we didn't increase very much. We'll increase our production by 60% this year. No one thought that would occur. I guess I don't know what your question is. If there was no ethanol from Brazil, how would we meet our self-sufficiency? Well, we are but one part of a very large solution, one small part. Again, we do not have enough corn. There will not be enough vehicles. There's just a lot of limitations out there. We are not looking to solve America's energy dependence on the backs of 300,000 corn farmers. It just isn't physically possible. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of this mess overnight. But there's a lot of other players in this game that will be coming around, and I think a lot of them will take a look at the template of how we did it, the ethanol industry in this country, and maybe see where we had some successes. Certainly, we've had a lot. I certainly agree with you, sir, that there's some good stories out of what happened today, and I think that my takeaway is not so much concern about do we have enough corn or the tariff issue or anything else, is that the two largest producers of ethanol in the world are making a commitment to make this a global commodity that will be traded globally and improve other economies, and that there will be other countries that will come into production, and that is the story today, is that we've got a good set of problems in front of us.
Let me just quickly comment and kind of take this in stages. I and my agency say there's no silver bullet, single solution to the transportation fuel dilemma. Ethanol will play a major role. Corn and sugar ethanol will play a major role. Cellulosic ethanol will play a major role. But I said earlier, California has said, and I think it should be true worldwide, we need to diversify our portfolio of fuels. We may go into a world of producing fuels of various kinds to meet on a more regional basis that will work in the population of vehicles we have. I'm beginning to hear some discussion about improving the efficiency of vehicles, making them more efficient. We're also pushing technology of various kinds, hybrid cars, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which is something I've been personally pushing for ever since my beloved electric car went down the tube several years ago, and now all of a sudden the auto industry is saying that's will be a reality, and we have to change the way we live a little bit to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, to reduce the amount of fuel we consume. That's going to be a long haul, which most people aren't willing to address just yet, but that means major land use and transportation planning efforts by what's left of this generation and the next generation, so we don't just have this perpetual spiral of dilemmas. It's going to take all of those things to have enough transportation fuel to move us around and some new forms of moving people around, more mass movement of people. It's going to take all of those things to solve the problem. There is no single solution. Each will play its share in the process, and will probably move in stages or wedges of activity. Wedges seem to be popular in Washington these days. So, that's my view of where we're going.
Well, gentlemen, I think we exceeded our time. I'm going to allow, if Aluísio allows me, one more question from the attendees, and that will be the last one of this panel. I think that Aluísio will take over.
Hi, my name is Dennis Shin. I'm with Catholic Relief Services. There was some anecdotal reference of ethanol, the promise of ethanol as potentially a source for poverty alleviation, and I wanted to get, maybe directed at Roberto, your sense for what the experience has been to date as far as any signs of increase in income-generating activities amongst the rural poor, and then maybe furthermore whether the World Bank or other regional development banks have shown interest in potentially promoting this.
Well, if I understood the question about the funding of the ethanol industry will take, is that so? No, I'm sorry.
Integrating, whether there's been any empirical evidence of at least to date in Brazil, using an example, of increased production actually benefiting the rural poor.
The poor population?
Yes.
I see. Well, sugarcane, it's a kind of culture that needs large plantations. And of course, we employ a lot of people in the sugarcane plantations, and subsequently in the ethanol industry. As Paulo mentioned, we have more than 1 million jobs today just in São Paulo in the sugarcane industry. And we believe that the interior of Brazil, other states like Goiás, Mato Grosso, Minas Gerais, there are now a big expansion of new areas, savanna areas, cerrados, where we are placing ethanol and, of course, converting rural areas in much more modern society and improving development. But let me tell you something. Socially speaking, I guess the best raw material for ethanol is cassava, because cassava you need small farmers or smallholders, where you are going to have millions of people involved in producing cassava to deliver to the ethanol distilleries and refineries. And I believe this experience we are starting to see in Africa is showing up that the benefits, both in terms of economic and social effects, are outstanding. There are two countries which are more involved in this experience. One is Nigeria, which already have a biofuel program taking place, and Brazil is very much cooperating to that. So it's no longer a dream. We are doing that. What President Bush is asking us to do, to cooperate, we are already doing it. Brazil has economic cooperation with African countries and Latin American countries to produce ethanol. We do not have at any moment doubt that we need other countries to produce and consume ethanol to create an international market. So other countries, Ghana is also considering the use of cassava and making a pilot plant there, which I believe is going to bring social benefits to these countries very much. So I wonder why they could not export to the United States in future. That's my question.
Well, I will leave this question here to be answered by all of us at the reception which will follow. In any event, I think I will turn over to Aluísio for the last part of our seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. I'd like to thank the panel. I think it was a fantastic panel to close this whole day event. And I would just like to take a few minutes. We have some caipirinhas waiting for us outside. So, and as we say here, we either burn it or drink it, right? Yes. So I just want to take a few minutes to, first of all, thank the Wilson Center and particularly the Brazil Institute for hosting us this year. Paulo Sotero did a great job for us here. And I'd like to mention also the work that Daniel and his team did for us here. I'd like to also thank the support of the Brazilian Embassy, which was always key for us to keep our event going, and particularly to Minister Carlos Alfredo for his attention this year, especially on producing this fantastic panel that you're looking at here today. I also like to thank the Brazil-U.S. Business Council for their support, to the legal advisors of the ABCI Institute, Arnold and Porter, and to our sponsors, Castro Barros Sobral Gomes Advogados, Felsberg Associados, Greenberg Trorig, Matos Muriel Kastner Advogados, Sidley Austin, and Veirano Advogados. And next year, we'll be here, Friday of Carnival.